Bibles to the text of Galatians in chapter 4. We'll be reading through part of that this evening. Actually from verse 8, looking at about 3 different segments to the first verse of chapter 5 is the plan. We'll see how it plays out. That's all right. Before we get going into our study tonight, if you would bow with me in prayer. And then after that prayer, we'll start our class together. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the time that we are privileged to share together in spiritual things and the opportunity to study and reflect upon your word. Help us as disciples to look deeply within ourselves and allow the scriptures to sustain and build our faith and understanding of whom we need to develop into. Help us to see clearly our own lives in reflection of the gospel. And please forgive us of our sins. And we offer this prayer in your Son's name. Amen. So we are in the last half, if you will, of this last chunk of the first half of this 2-part study, because we're looking at 2 complementary parts of the New Testament text. We're looking at Galatians, which is the law, if you will, and then James, which I've kind of accommodatively titled, as a few others have as well, the gospel. There's some reasons thematically why that fits. Some of it has to do with the content of each of the letters. Galatians deals with the interaction between the sufficiency and fulfillment of Jesus regarding the old law. And you'll see some incremental teaching, especially in this core section tonight. Whereas James, as an epistle, its letter, might be structured or at least thought of in this way as a re-examination of the Sermon on the Mount. A lot of the content of James follows the core thrust of the message of Jesus' preaching on the Sermon on the Mount and a little bit of what is called the Sermon on the Plains, which is found in the other Gospels. And so those 2 messages frame the content that James is kind of doubling down on in that epistle. Sometimes in the epistles or the writings of the New Testament authors, they are adding additional insight to what Jesus taught or expanding or explaining more complicated things, and James does a little bit of that. But most of it is really just, here's a look back again into these core gospel truths, gospel principles that are important for all of us. Thematically, big picture, we step back for a second and we think about what's going on. There are some core messages, super important ideas that are found here in Galatians. And one of them we're going to see at the close, but what I want to do right now is, as we start, look at it a second time, because I think it's one of the thematic verses that we can use to remember, hey, what's Galatians about? Here's one of them. This is Galatians chapter 5, verse 1. It's where Paul writes, "For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery." So there is something super valuable in what Paul has just said that has going to make this tie of like, hey, were they slaves? How were they slaves? What were they a slave to? And then what does Christ set them free from, set us free from? And what is the danger about going back into that relationship? So he's going to talk about that. We'll talk about it too. But I want to ask this question. How often in the story of God's people, from Genesis to Malachi, do we see Israel kind of doing that same thing? They're free and they go back into slavery. Does it happen once?
No, over and over.
Twice? 3 times? It's not a song from the 70s, it's all the times. It happens every single time you can think about it, that Israel is free. We're free. We're free from our oppressors. We're free from our overarching kings who aren't great kings. We're free from Egypt. We're free from... But we're not free from ourselves. Because their hearts aren't always truly converted back to God. In Exodus 33 and 34, there's a whole dialogue that's kind of like this too. You might want to read that at your leisure elsewhere, where they're having the same problem. Who are we actually worshiping? Who are we trending towards? So let's look now in the text. This will start us in verse 8. This is where Paul here writes to the churches of Galatia, "Formerly you did not know God. You were enslaved to those by nature are not gods," little g in context. "But now you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God. How can you turn back again to the weak and worthless elementary principles of the world, whose slaves you want to be once more? You observe days and months and seasons and years." And it continues, "Brothers, I entreat you, become as I am." So let's do a little extra history. Right before Israel rebuilds the temple, where are they living? Israel as a people. What's the geographic? This is going back to our history and geography of the Bible class that we spent a year on. But in general speaking terms, which two big countries, nations, brought Israel into captivity? Babylonia and Assyria, right? That puts them in the region known as Mesopotamia. But that's the land between the two rivers. That's also a great barbecue joint name. Two Rivers Barbecue. That's the way you can think about it, because the primary worship space of the day of King Cyrus, is when they were set free, is a religion that's still practiced today. You think I know that. I just read it earlier today. Let's see if I can get this pronounced right. Zoroastrianism.
We don't know the difference anyway.
Yeah, listen. Zorro. We're going to go with that right now. I need more caffeine in my system. If anyone's got like an IV for some Monster or some Red Bull, that's probably a good thing. And I think I'd die if it gave me coffee, but something else might work. All right, so that's a common religion, not common, but it's a known religion today. Its birth, though, is in that time period when Israel is being set free. It has some hallmarks of ideas and convictions that are similar to Judaism, and then will become known also, they'll adopt some Christian things as well. But one of the key things in their practice is they have sacrifices and worship in a fire temple, where fire is a key element of that practice. Lots of sacrifices, lots of burning things. And so when Paul says, the gods you are serving, they're weak, they're elementary, think about it in that basic physical sense of offering sacrifices to the elements of the planet, the simplistic side of things. But now you've left all that. You've left all these pagan gods, whether they be Roman, Persian, I'll just use that, that's easier. The gods of the nations around them, the Egyptian gods, you've left all behind. Why go back? Those gods didn't know you. You really didn't benefit from the relationship, but now God knows you. And you are now known by him. That's helping us answer part of our, hey, what's going on in chapter 5, verse 1. There's something substantial that's going to take place in the development of a disciple, a follower of Jesus, that's going to shift that relationship from the past to the future. It's similar, by the way, to what's in Colossians 2 and verse 20. It says right there, if with Christ you died to the elemental spirits of the world, as if you were still alive to the world, do you submit to regulations? Same concept that Paul is writing there. They were enslaved to that past, now they're set free. They were enslaved to those little g gods in the past, now they're also set free. In Psalms 92, I think it is, there's a similar terminology that's used with little g gods under play as well, where this is a nation state that's made a state god like the Roman cities would do, the Greek cities would do. They'd have their own city god. I say all of that then to add one more step for us. You and I are no different than them. You say, now wait a minute. I have never been enslaved to an elementary god like that. I didn't follow the gods of the Persians. I wasn't offering sacrifices at the temple of Diana. What do you mean by that? In Romans chapters 1, 2, and 3, what does Paul indicate is the general thing for all of us? If we don't follow the creator God of the universe, well, what about what goes on for the rest of us?
The worldly things can become our gods if our heart is not in the right place.
Yeah. What then could become our gods? Like we can use these nebulous worldly things terms, and that's like a great basket. But let's get specific or real. What can become our God if we don't mindfully tend our spiritual selves?
Many things can, our jobs can become our gods, our sports can become gods.
Oh, wait a minute. Sports, careful talk now.
I like my sports, but I got them where they belong.
Hey, look, I'll get real with it. Scouting, serving your kids through a community service like scouting could be something that could take the place of the divine power of the King of the universe. Money, the love of it, in particular, is dealt with elsewhere. Family. Do you realize you can turn your family into an idol? The Bible's replete with examples of people having to make a choice. All those things. A sense of achievement and accomplishment. I gotta be somebody. Attention. I need attention. People got to pay attention to me. All those things can be. Michael, you had something there.
I was just thinking about how fleeting all of those actually are. You know, all those things that we get them in our head that's important. Whether it's building up retirement funds, or building up a business, or trying to get more customers, or putting our children on pedestals they don't belong on. Like put their well-being in front of everything. And all those things are fleeting. They're just gone. Yeah. Life's short.
How much effort do we put into crafting the everyday aspect of our life? We put a lot of effort in like making sure everything runs pretty consistently.
There's calendars for that.
We got calendars and apps and different
where I'm
things.
supposed to be and when I'm supposed to be there.
Yeah. And in the end, does it matter as much as we feel like it does? No. Now you want to test your system? How many of you have a cell phone that you use every day? Let's be honest. Most of us have one, right? I want you to think about how you would feel if you left it at home for an entire week. At what time would the stressor hit and you couldn't see the photos of the grand boy? Or in my case, I couldn't get the FaceTime call from my kid who's in Turkey. I was bothered today because I didn't get my call because there's apparently not very good cell service on the Roman road. So he can't really call me.
We got by with all it just fine for a long time.
I don't know what I'm talking about. I didn't live that world. I lived on the other side of it where I was the kid, not the parent. But that's how we feel. We feel we gotta have these things. There's not a very large leap from one to the other. A lot of it has to do with, like Les was pointing out earlier, where do I value it? Where do I put it in its place? Can I truly exist in absence of it? And I think it's interesting that the text kind of scoots forward as we're listening to Paul teach. And he talks about the ritual of religion in the same space. So in this case, it's probably referring implicitly or directly towards Jewish religious practices. Things that would be part of their old faith explicitly, but not exclusively. Because that same kind of context would have been in any religion. Every religion has its fixed ritual days. He goes on, and this is verse 11 where it continues. I am afraid I may have labored over you in vain. Whew. Is that a hard thing to think about? All this effort, put all this energy in. And the vein that's used there in the New Testament is the same word for vanity that appears back in Ecclesiastes in the Greek translation of the Old Testament. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Smoke, nothingness. I labor over you for no profit. How much effort does Paul, or how much effort do you think Paul is willing to give to strengthen another Christian?
Everything he has. His
All of
life.
it. Now there's an interesting philosophical principle that physics talks about it too, where if I put forth the energy to go halfway to that door, all right, today, and tomorrow I get up and I put forth the same energy to go halfway to that door, will I ever reach the door if I'm only willing to go halfway? Never. Paul is demonstrating the kind of lifestyle that says he's always 100% in. All of his effort, that door's right, I'm going there today. I'm going to complete that journey. I'm not going to go halfway. There's a lot, you can get lost in the philosophy of that, but think about the practical side. Paul is all in, all the time. And if he says, did I labor over this in vain? Did I give all of myself for none? For nothing? It continues in verse 12, and it says, brothers, I entreat you, become as I am, for I also have become as you are. You did me no wrong. You know, it was because of a bodily ailment that I preached the gospel to you at first. And though my condition was a trial to you, you did not scorn or despise me, but received me as a messenger, angel of God, as Christ Jesus. What then has become of your blessedness? For I testify to you that if possible, you would have gouged out your eyes and given them to me. Have I become your enemy by telling you the truth? Whew. So he's giving us some backstory that helps us answer some of these questions about the life of Paul to a small degree. He was there, why? Roughly. Why did he preach the gospel to him? Something so physically notable that they knew about it, and it should have offended them, and it didn't. And they loved him enough in the long run that says, I'll give you my eyeball. I want you to think about that. I've noticed this with that text. How much of our day is dependent upon our capacity to see? What if you have no eyes to see by? How much are you going to get done in your life? No, not a lick. I can't do anything that actually is in my responsibility. I feel like I can't do anything. The first gospel preaching that I did was to fill in for Boyd Sellers while he was fighting against possible consequences of losing his sight. He had a period of time for about 5 years where he literally went blind and he could see again because of medical treatment to his eyes. So I drove up from Bowling Green, Kentucky, to do some meeting work for him in his stead because he couldn't read. He could still see to kind of walk around, but he couldn't read anymore. If you can't read, it makes it a lot harder to study to preach a whole gospel meeting. Gouge out your eyes so that Paul could continue the gospel. And then, a little while later, they're like, meh. We loved you, but we don't anymore. We loved you so much that we would sacrifice essential parts of our being. But now, we don't like what you're saying. We don't like the way you're saying it. We won't have to listen to that. Do we respond that way to information sometimes? Like when someone tells us something we really need to hear, we just don't like it. And so instead of accepting what we're told, well, clearly I need to get a different doctor because the doctor told me that. I don't like what he said. I don't like the way he said it. Raise your hand if you felt that feeling. Listen, I feel that feeling. I've been pretty open about the fact that my doctor told me I was fat. He's a great doctor. We laughed together while he was telling me it. by a lot of terms, I would not have been considered fat, but my own self-definition. I want you to think about how that it can be so accessible to us, we can appreciate it, but remember, it's not just for the others. Oh, it's not just these Galatians are doing it now. Oh, it's just every once in a while when it's something I don't want to hear about life. This is spiritual knowledge they needed to retain and sustain their souls, and they're going back to where they were. They're abandoning Jesus. They're abandoning sanctification. They're like, well, that's cool. We're just going back. Paul, I don't want to hear you anymore. Paul's heart is far more passionate about it. He desires for them who were once so affectionate toward him to now, are they acting him like he's the enemy? He's the bad guy. He then will go on and gives us a hint of what's going underneath the scenes as well. They make much of you, but for no good purpose. They want to shut you out, that you may make much of them. It is always good to be made much of for a good purpose, and not only when I am present with you, my little children, for whom I am again in anguish of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. I wish I could be present with you now and change my tone, for I am perplexed about you. His tone goes to a unique, something happens in the grammar underneath there too, but you can catch the tone. Why? This is like this whole heartfelt space for him, and he's opening up every ounce of whom he is and saying, I wish I could be there to help with this. I wish I could be there in person so you could see and feel my emotions. Two-part question. Same question, just from different angles. Have you ever sent or received a letter or text message, email as well, and you look at it and go, they don't like me? Or on the other end, you received it, why are they so mad at me? And that is absolutely not at all what the other person intended or what you intended when you wrote it. Like if you type everything in all caps, I want to inform you that all caps means yelling, if you did not know that. Don't ask me to translate emojis. I don't know what any of them do. I just use them however I feel. There are rules for them that exist somewhere on the internet. I don't care. I just use them how I like them. Carefully though, because some of them are weird. But all caps yelling. Full sentences also can be conceived as yelling now too. Unfortunately, I can only write in full sentences for the most part. So I don't know what to do. But that lands that way. It lands like, oh, why are you so upset with me? What did I do to you? All I did was hit OK to your message. Now you're upset with me. Same thing is in part going on here when Paul is going back and forth with his tone. I'm so deeply concerned. I'm so worried. He's trying to help them understand that this is a really important thing. And there is somebody in the middle who's trying to stir him up in a different direction. Les?
It's real similar to what was going on in Hebrews when they were under persecution and wanting to go back to the old law. You know, persecution, and they were told that you should be ready to have meat now, but you still need milk. You haven't grown. Your heart's not dedicated like it should be.
Yeah. There's some part of maturity has atrophied in their hearts. They may have been mature enough before for their context, but now they're regressing backwards. And it has in part to do with whomever is coming from James. It's not, when it uses that term, they're not disciples of James and the rest of the biblical text. It's a label to group them because it's a label they took for themselves. Oh, we're from James. We know what we're about. We know who we're for. They are the false teachers. They are the ones who are seeking to draw them back towards an aberration of law. And that's why he has this, I'm perplexed. Michael?
There's a sadness in the tone that's relatable in this section, like in verse 11 when he says, I fear for you, perhaps I labored in vain. And when you get to the end of 20, and it says, I'm perplexed about you. So he knows he's put work into these people. He knows he's taught them. He knows they know the truth, and he's brokenhearted for them. And it's so easy to relate to when we think of our brethren that are not here, or our family members that are not here, or just co-workers that we know the truth. And it's a sadness in his tone that unfortunately is so very relatable.
Yeah, I was incredibly privileged to work with a large number of college students in Tennessee. We were right next to a college in Cookeville, Tennessee. That means you got college kids coming out every year, new batch of them, and so I've got a list of all of them. I keep in touch with most of them, but what hurts the most is the ones who have gone into the world or back into the world. Those are the ones that hurt the most. Investment for all of them was high. It's not the ones whose lives were cut short by weather events. That hurts. But it's the ones who are living but yet are dead on the inside. Those are the ones that hurt a lot. And I kind of connect emotionally to a certain degree. Did I do it in vain? Did I give all of myself for nothing? Because all they did was go right back into the world. And then I realized I have no control over it. I can't magically make everyone stay faithful. What was that? Free will is my natural enemy in all things. Free will is my own enemy, let alone theirs as well to a certain degree. So there's a lot going on there that we can kind of connect to. But remember, this is not just a them issue. It's not just these other college kids I might be thinking about or individuals we know. It's me. It's you. It's us. We can be drawn in the same ways by the same slick ideas. Because to a certain degree, that's what's going on there. They have repackaged parts of the old law in a way that makes, we should probably keep this. We should keep doing this. Not just because it's interesting or nice, because now they're saying it's must. You must keep it. You must be circumcised. You must keep holy days. He then goes from I'm concerned about you. I'm concerned of you like a parent watching you be born, to now using argumentation. This is a very Pauline approach. A bit of relational, and then a whole lot of, let me tell you something logically of what's going on. So he's set the stage. He's got everyone in the right space, and he says, tell me. You who desire to be under the law, do you not listen to the law? For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons, one by a slave woman and one by a free woman. The son of the slave was born according to the flesh, while the son of the free woman was born through promise. Now this may be interpreted or understood allegorically. These women are 2 covenants. One is from Mount Sinai, bearing children for slavery. She is Hagar. Now Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia. She corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem above is free, and she is our mother. For it is written, rejoice, O barren one who does not bear. Break forth and cry aloud, you who are not in labor. For the children of the desolate one will be more than those of the one who has a husband. Now you, brothers, like Isaac, are children of promise. But just as at that time he was born according to the flesh, persecuted him who was born according to the Spirit, so it is now. But what does the Scripture say? Cast out the slave woman and her son, for the son of the slave woman shall not inherit with the son of the free woman. So, brothers, we are not children of the slave, but of the free woman. Listen, Paul is basically saying, let's square up and box, because he is using some of the most direct terminology to describe the relationship of the people in his audience, the churches of Galatia, and their God. He's saying, look, do you really want to be part of the kingdom, or do you want to be cut off? The message of Christ says that the gospel is over here where freedom is. You're going back to slavery. You're going back to the same slavery that those in Jerusalem still want to be bound by. And it's important to realize that we tend to have a bit of a connection issue from what we think about slavery in the 21st century. How many of you, when the subject of slavery comes up, immediately have feelings about it? Like it's like you got a feeling, right? I do too. Immediately have a feeling. I got my history brain going on. I'm thinking about all these different things. And we're living in a world where now, second question, how many of you used to be a slave, not in the biblical sense of you're a slave to your sin, but a first century type slave in the 21st century? Any of us slaves? But we got feelings about it, right? We see about my relatives were slaves, so were mine. First century world, everybody knows or is related to or is surrounded by slavery at a rate that we're not comfortable with thinking about. Because nearly everyone's a slave that's not Roman citizen in some way or another. Like that's a way of, like, statistically the slavery crowd is more numerous than the not slave crowd in every single city, everywhere. So when Paul is talking about this, it's not just about our negative feelings. Everyone knows what it's like to be a slave. That means you don't get to choose. You don't have any freedom at all. It's not even in the repackaged slavery where we try to like soften its edges. Anytime you hear someone say, well, slavery wasn't that bad, they haven't read enough. And they've forgotten that at the root cause, you don't get to choose what you do. You don't get to choose where you live. You don't get to choose whom you marry. You don't get to choose how you worship or if you worship. All those freedoms go away. But push all that to the side, and in the context of what Paul is writing, you're going back to a slave who could get cast out in a minute. Because really, kind of track your finger back up at the beginning of chapter 4, verse 8 and 9. God knows you. You are known by him. Slave or free, you're known by him. He's trying to get them to understand what's going on if their desire is really to go back to be under the law. And it's weird because Paul fought so hard to stay under the law. So what was he doing that? What was the dialogue that takes place when Paul is having his big moment on the way to Damascus, on the road? What does the messenger of God say to him?
Why are you persecuted?
Yeah. And he says, Saul, how long will you kick against the goads? How long will you continue to fight against the thing you know you ought to do? Yeah, I'm pretty stubborn. Really stubborn. As I said before, what makes the fat man fat? My fat, right? I'm the fat man in the story. What makes my clothes, do my clothes make me look fat? No, my fat does. So how long do I kick against my conscience? It's telling me the thing to do is to lose weight so I'm not carrying a second person around with me, right? I'm my problem. It's my stubborn conscience. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Paul, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I don't need to listen to what this Jesus guy is saying. I've spent my whole life preparing to be a leader in Israel. What's this rabbi from the poorest part of the entire space of Israel got to teach me? In fact, we should kill people who follow him. How long will you kick against the goads? Paul is ready to fight at every inch, and then he's the one saying, do you really want to go back under the law? Because he knows what it's like to be free. He had escaped, in essence, two prisons. The prison that he built by his conscience and the prison of his sin. So it's time to go back. And so he's using this whole allegorical space of the relationship of the sons, Ishmael and Isaac, of Hagar and Sarah, to try to identify that these new disciples of Jesus are the people of promise. It's a fulfillment of every part of the law's forecasting. It's prophecy. And if you go back to the law, you don't get the prophecy. What you get is the curse. That's pulled out of the Old Testament text, Genesis 21 and verse 10. So he said, Abraham, cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of the slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac. Strong, hard to digest statement. And that really is kind of summarizing it all together, that this redemptive work has already been given to them. You've been redeemed. Why you want to go back? So, for freedom Christ has set us free. Stand firm and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. How would you feel right now if people came in with chains and shackles and started locking you up? How many of you are going to put up a fight? Yeah, all of us are going to try, right? The minute one of us recognizes those shackles clasp in, you're going to fight to keep everybody else free? We tell them, oh, of course I am. They get enough, though. Well, can we get overpowered by numbers? Absolutely. There's a certain number of people that's too many people for us to fight off. We know that's how we feel about it, right? We don't want to be enslaved. We're not going to be sent off to a camp together. We don't want it. How would you feel if Stuart got up and said, I'm just going to lock myself in? Just take me off. Stuart, don't do that. Right? Stuart's not that. Stuart, why are you doing that? Michael does it next. He locks himself into the chains and says, take me off too. I want to go back to slavery. Will we think that the West Boys have lost their ever-loving mind? Absolutely. But again, it's not just about the Galatians. Because it's also about you and I. We do the same thing. Our shackles just have different labels on it. Right? I broke them off, but I got them on the shelf. And every once in a while I look at them and go, you know, it wasn't that bad to be a slave. Do you realize that that's a little bit how we think about our past lives? It wasn't really that bad. Except not only is that a lie we tell ourselves, we then cut ourselves off from the promises and the blessedness of being in Christ and being free. There's a lot that actually is underneath the rhetoric, where he combines the knowledge, the rhetoric of logic, this whole allegory, but also the pathos, the emotion, the care, the concern, that whole picture of childbirth. Even, by the way, if you want to know a little bit of how a first century rabbi would argue in the synagogues in favor of God, Paul's like employing classic first century preaching right there in his speech when he's writing it to them. That's like what a sermon would have sounded like in the synagogues in Israel. That kind of, let me tell you this, let me tell you that. Here's the Bible, Old Testament scriptures. Okay, let me lay it out there for you. A couple more passages for tonight. We've got just a few minutes left in time, but this is where we can ask some questions. We've already explored what are today's weak and worthless elemental principles, the false gods of today. But let's narrow the focus in this yoke of slavery illustration and apply it in context this way. What levels of self-justification or legalism do we encounter that behave the same way? Like, well, I know I'm justified because I'm a Jew. Because that's kind of what they were doing to a certain degree. Or I know I'm justified because I'm still keeping the Sabbath days. Are there things like that in Christianity and amongst the circles of Christians we have that do the same thing? Les, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I was thinking about But we can do that with our, being faithful to 10 services. If we say that's where our salvation comes from, is strictly being at all the services.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than that. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week heart change.
Les and I have talked about this a lot. Each of us have a strong commitment to be here at services. Maybe also a little too strong of a commitment to be here early. Ain't going to change for either of us, so don't worry about that. But we're committed. But that's not a standard of my salvation. That's a little bit of my own issues, and a little bit of I made a promise, right? But that's not faithfulness. That's habit, ritual. It's super easy for the preacher to show up to church. Kind of expect to be there. That's a low bar. There's a lot more to think about. How about your baptism? Baptism a big deal? Absolutely, 100%. It's the crucial pinpoint of change between one to the other. The Bible makes it really clear. It's not a complicated thing. But is being baptized sufficient in and of itself to mean that you're righteous? Even if you do it for the right reasons. Whatever they are. Whatever you think is really important to you that you've got to add to your, I was baptized and I believed this. There's no magic shield. It ain't going to keep you from doing dumb. You can do dumb, dumber, and dumber after you've made great choices. The Bible shows a lot of individuals making those same contextual outcomes. Here's my go home and chew on it thing. This is like the advocate side. I want, for myself, I know I'm going to be doing this, to think deeply about what it means to stand firm in freedom. Because we tend to think about freedom as agency and activity. I can go do. I can go be. I can choose. But then Paul makes a rhetorical twist and says, stand firm in it. It doesn't make logical sense on one level. You want me to be free and stay firm at the same time? My brain goes, how can I do both at the same time? But there's some practical application space in contrast to legalism, self-justification, that make really good sense, such as don't treat your baptism like it's the standard. Don't act like just because you have the right family heritage, you're going to heaven. Don't act like your circumcision, your holy day, your whatever is sufficient. Because none of them do anything without Christ and the willingness to stay in Him. That's it for our time this evening. We'll be continuing, picking up in verse 2 next Sunday as we move through the last chunk of the text of Galatians.